do you think that Democrats have a messaging problem when it comes to being a deficit hawk? Because when you think of lawmakers who position themselves and talk about themselves and message themselves as deficit hawks, you almost only exclusively think of Republicans.
So, in the Rules Committee last night, we had a Representative Alderholt who wrote an op-ed that I pulled up and said, "Remember this op-ed you wrote where you were complaining about the deficit? Uh, where do you stand now?" And they just hum and haw because once again, they're rubber stamping what Trump gives them. So even if they have spoken against the deficit, they're rubber stamping a deficit explosion. And they did it under the first Trump administration. They're doing it under this one now. And Democrats speak about it. I speak about it all the time. We need to make sure that people like you ask those questions so we can get that word out.
And I do not want to switch gears just for the final moments that I have you. I want to talk about the rescissions package. The White House is asking Congress for $9.4 billion back after Congress appropriated that money, and $8.3 billion would be cut from foreign aid and $1.1 billion would be cut from public broadcast. What do you make of that ask?
So once again, in the Rules Committee last night, we hit them on this really hard because think about the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Uh, the public radio is often the most important source of information during disasters. In rural areas, it is essential. It's how people get information about the weather, about local programming. You get a lot of local programming in public radio. And then the issues around, the children's programming, the educational programming that you get on PBS. What Republicans said is, oh, that's all right. Sesame Street will be fine because it's going to be streamed on Netflix. Netflix costs money. So this is another example of how they are saying, well, private corporations can make a lot of money, and we're going to just make it more expensive for working families. And then we take away this essential service that Americans depend on and support. And I also pointed out that Republicans used to support public broadcasting. They changed their mind after Trump tweeted that they tell lies, right? He doesn't like the fact that these news outlets are honest and they explain and they always bring both sides. But that is not good enough for him, right? And so he tweeted out something. And so all these Republicans that used to support it, in fact, once again, Alabama, the Representative Alderholt from Alabama said, oh, my Alabama public broadcasting is marvelous. I'd like to save him. He just said, well, vote against this bill, right? But he didn't. And across states, you have Republicans who don't believe in this, will say something, but then they always cave. So there's the taco Trump, but the other thing that's always happening is those Republicans are always caving as well.
And
And then the last thing on that rescission is remember the cuts that they are making internationally are going to come back and hurt us because when you cut access to healthcare and health research and communicable diseases, COVID did not start in the United States. It came over here, and you are cutting the money that will keep us safe. You're cutting the money that help keep America's interests alive and well across this country. And they are cutting the money for Ukraine specifically. So it's really awful the number of babies that will die across the world because of Republicans' cruel cuts.
I'm not poo-pooing $9 billion. I'm not saying $9 billion isn't a big deal, but when you're looking at the national debt, that's really just a drop in the bucket. I was speaking with your colleague, Congressman Schweikert, and he said that that's less than a day and a half worth of all borrowing. So when you're cutting things like Sesame Street, when you're cutting things like foreign aid, when you're cutting things like public broadcasting, things that are relatively popular amongst the American people, I mean, what are your Republican colleagues saying? Is this a popular idea amongst Republicans?
Well, I think it's once again, they are rubber stamping whatever Trump tells them to do. They do not have the courage to stand up for their constituents. And it is, I called it a molecule last night. It's not a drop in the bucket, it's a molecule. It's, less than 1%, less than, something 0.3%. It's very, very little. And remember, it is also that we spent over $100 billion on DOGE in just 6 months, like $135 billion or so on DOGE. They cost the American, if they would have just never come into existence, we could have saved, all that money and kept public broadcasting. If, they have about, I don't know, maybe $34 billion or so in contracts to Musk. Well, let's just cut some of those contracts to Musk, right? There is a lot of corruption that we are seeing in this administration. If you cut out that fraud, the fraud of where you actually have Trump's net worth growing by $2.9 billion in the 6 months since he took office. Well, let's cut out that kind of fraud, and then you could actually pay for public broadcasting.
Congresswoman, I really appreciate the time today. I appreciate your insight here. You are welcome back anytime. Thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you so much. It's been wonderful to be on with you and with all of your viewers. Muchísimas gracias.